I own a lot of controllers for the Nintendo Switch, from the stock Joy-Cons to the Pro Controller, GameCube recreations, and a handful of other 8-bit-do replicas. I'm always on the lookout for new, interesting ways to enjoy games on the Switch, and to give my controllers a fresh look. And on the heels of seeing Detective Pikachu, I happened to come across this little guy. An unassuming third-party controller from BEBONCOOL, a brand that I've never heard of. At $30, I was fairly confident that this thing would end up feeling kind of cheap. But the design was charming enough that I went ahead and gave it a shot anyways. When it arrived in this tiny and frankly kind of crappy looking packaging, I worried that this may have been a huge mistake, because let's be real, this is not the best first impression. Little did I know, it would quickly become one of my favorite controllers and the primary way that I play most of my Switch games. So let's break down why. Budget third-party controllers can often feel light, hollow, and cheap, but the first thing that surprised me about this guy was his heft. Not in a bad way, it's not like you're holding a brick or anything, but in your hands, you can feel how sturdy and well designed it is. I also expected the controller to be missing features that you would find in the official Pro controller, but again it subverted expectations and delivered on almost all fronts while improving on others. With the exception of the missing NFC reader, but let's be real, amiibos are on their last legs with fewer and fewer games supporting them. The BEBONCOOL wireless controller comes motion ready, and as far as I can tell, it's just as precise as the real deal, working totally fine for pointer controls and rolling around in Mario Odyssey. The added inclusion of turbo functionality isn't a selling point for me personally, but it's there if you want it, and offers multiple speed settings at 5, 12, or 20 button presses per second. This might be sacrilegious, but I've never been the biggest fan of HD rumble. In fact, I have a theory that it was always just a gimmick that Nintendo thought up to justify the downgrade to a cell phone-like buzzing, rather than the deep, heavy shake that you get from swinging a big ol' weight around inside the controller. Which makes sense, as that technology just wouldn't fit inside of a Joy-Con. But when Nintendo implemented that same style of rumble into their Pro controller, it was pretty disappointing. This relatively chunky hunk of plastic emitting a high-pitched buzz is a clear downgrade from what you'd find in competing hardware. Thankfully, BEBONCOOL wasn't interested in following suit and went for the traditional, extra chunky style of rumble that feels super impactful. You can even adjust the intensity to your liking. It's fantastic. And if you're an HD Rumble superfan, I understand that losing the ability to feel exactly where the rumble is coming from in your controller may be upsetting. But given that the newly announced Switch Lite is planning to remove that functionality entirely, I can't imagine that Nintendo is going to implement that feature going forward. You charge the controller using the same USB-C port that you find on the Pro controller and the Switch itself. There's no need to carry around an extra micro USB cable like with some of the other controllers out there. Taking roughly 2 hours or so for a full charge, this sucker lasts for a respectable 9 hours of continuous play, and you can also use it while it's charging. The only downside that I've found, and granted this is a big one, is that you can't seem to wake up the console with the controller. This is an issue that seems pretty common amongst third-party Switch controllers. You either need to keep an extra controller handy to get the system started first, or walk over to it and turn it on yourself. If that's a deal breaker, I understand. But in my house, an extra controller is almost always within reach, so it's never that big a deal. The plastic they used has a nice, subtle texture to it, and the compact design feels really nice in your hands. Your index fingers naturally wrap around the triggers, and pushing them down feels really nice. The bumpers also feel a little bit easier to reach, probably because they're closer together than on the Pro controller. The face buttons are sturdy, and pressing them down has a definitive and less squishy feel, for a lack of a better term. Both analog sticks have a bit more resistance than the Pro controllers, and they also have these ribbed edges which help maintain your grip. They honestly feel of a higher quality than Nintendo's analog sticks, if you can believe it. Really, the only part of this controller that left something to be desired is the D-pad, which seems a little bit too shallow and close to the controller. And while it has a well-defined up and down state, it unfortunately shares the Pro controller's issue of being prone to unintended diagonal inputs, which is super annoying in certain games. That's why for 2D platformers that play best with the D-pad, I still stick to these guys whenever possible. As I mentioned before, the controller bears a striking resemblance to Pikachu, in spite of the lack of a single mention of the beloved yellow mascot on their product page. So be warned, there's no official branding here. Still, if you're looking for an excellent Pokemon-themed controller for your Switch, I think this fits the bill quite nicely. There are really only a few visual alterations I would make for it to be perfect, including the removal of the BEBONCOOL logo on the front, and perhaps an LED swap to change the internal light from green to red. Hell, maybe even throw in a Pokemon logo. Why not? I like this controller so much that maybe I'll actually get around to implementing some of these changes eventually. So there you have it. The BEBONCOOL wireless controller for Nintendo Switch is a wonderful surprise. The build quality, features, and design of a $30 accessory from a totally obscure brand has no business being this good, and it has earned its place as my favorite Switch controller so far. It gets a 4.5 out of 5.
Pikachu!